Well, these girls seem pretty happy. Now, let's go do something with this bale. We have just been getting dumped on with rain here for the last week, and you can see the slough here on the entrance to the winter pasture is just about to break over the banks. And as I'm filming this, it's starting to rain yet again. And we are supposed to get thunderstorms this afternoon, so maybe this is just kind of that starting to ramp up a little bit. So when we get back from feeding the steers, it'll kind of depend on what the weather's doing as far as what happens next. But, you know, that's just kind of the way it goes this time of year. That's what's going on today on Farmer Tyler Ranch. The last couple times that I've dropped bales out here, I keep saying I need to put the feeder back in the first pasture where it used to be. It is a little bit more convenient to get to right here because it's closer to where we park the tractor, but you notice how far they move that feeder, and we're not on flat ground, so if they get it going downhill, they can move it quite a long ways. And the reason why I don't like that is because there are sprinklers all over the place out here. There's one right here in front of the tractor, and there are several that are broken down here on this line, and I think it's because I've had this ring feeder up here, so it's making more work for me. But you know, this is just kind of what we had to do. What do you guys think? Why do you have to move that feeder around? Why can't you just leave it alone? They're not talking. Working in the wind is bad. Working and filming in the wind is even worse. Camera's blowing over, audio's terrible. I do not like the wind. I've said it before, I'll work in rain over wind any day. As I'm filming this, it is February 19th, I think today is. So that means that my first appointment for these steers is in exactly 1 month, March 19th. And what that means is that I need to move at least 4 back to the home ranch prior to that. I'd say 2 weeks prior to that is kind of what I like to do, just to give them time to settle into their new environment and relax and just kind of start to feel at home again. So I figure in 2 weeks, I've got to move some of them, and I might just move them all back because I think the next appointment, the second appointment, is only like 2 weeks later after that. I haven't quite decided exactly how I want to manage this. It's probably a better use of my time to just move them all at once. Just put, I think all 7 of them should fit in the trailer, no problem. I could just bring them all home, and that's most likely what I'll end up doing. And then I can either, depending on what the grass is doing over here, I might just turn right around and bring the next batch of steers that are eating at the little manger, just bring them up here once I get the big boys out. There is a potential scenario where I would have the mature steers and the next batch of steers grazing up here at the same time, but if I was ever to try to do that, I would need a better sorting corral, because I can just imagine that if I put them all together, then when it came time to pull out the mature steers to get them back home for their appointment, that it would just be that much harder to sort them off of the young steers. If I had a good way to do that, the young steers would already be here. I think I would have brought them up shortly after weaning, because there's really no reason to keep them at home when there's plenty of feed up here that they could be utilizing. I have to hide here next to the side-by-side to get out of the wind so that hopefully you can hear me. I'm not sure if the camera is gonna pick it up or not. I tried to film it on my phone. It usually kind of captures detail further away, but anyway, geese are becoming a problem out here in the pasture. I've noticed over the last couple days, basically the last 2 days that it's been storming, they've been wanting to land out here. And that first flock that I scared up when I drove out here, they're just circling me. They don't want to go anywhere. So I'm gonna try to put some bird tape up out here, and hopefully that'll kind of keep them out of here. It looks like we've got a few more days of this, and then the weather is going to turn nice, and at that point I imagine that the geese will start moving on and they won't be a problem. This hopefully will work out, because I know with bird tape they get used to it, but if we've only got to keep them out of here for like 2 or 3 more days, then maybe bird tape can do it. And for those of you that are wondering why I care, well, the geese absolutely destroy the pasture, and I've got a fairly decent stockpile getting started out here. In fact, if the weather does turn nice here in a week or so, I think that I can start stockpiling quite a bit and hopefully turn the cows out on the pasture sooner than later. If the geese get out here and totally destroy this pasture, pick it right down to the ground, it's gonna set us back even further. So that is why it's a big deal to me. It's not that I don't like geese, but if you let 10 of them sit out here, 10 attract 20, 20 attract 30 pretty soon, and I'm not exaggerating, this entire pasture, this is about 30 acres here, this entire thing will be a white sea of geese that will leave behind absolutely no grass. Hopefully you can hear me in this wind. I have noticed over the last couple days, the geese have been wanting to land in the same spot more or less. So we'll start putting the bird tape out there. This is where they were. The scare tape works both with sound and with sight. If the sun were to ever come out today, which it doesn't look like it will, it'll hit this tape and it's highly reflective. That'll catch the bird's eye when they're flying over looking for a spot to land. And then hopefully as they get down and get closer, they will hear that, and those two things together should hopefully be enough to get them to move on to a different spot. You can see this grass isn't like knee-high tall or anything, but it's definitely waking up and starting to get established. And if I can just keep the geese off of it, then the cows will have something good to eat here in about a month, I think. Well, it's very difficult to pick them up on camera, but if you were standing out here with me, you can actually see them pretty well across the entire pasture. Any flicker of light or any bit of movement is probably enough to deter geese, because you got to remember we're right at the end of hunting season, which is another point I was going to bring up. Why I'm not running to town to get my license and stamps is because the late goose season ends today. So that's just not an option this year, unfortunately. But because we're on the tail end of hunting season, these birds are used to getting shot at, and they're probably used to any time they see something that doesn't look quite right, they have learned that that means danger. So hopefully this will work this year. I don't know. We're gonna try it. One more thing that's got to be done while I'm over here, and let me give you a little backstory. So a few days ago, I put out a round bale to the weaned calves, and it turned out that it had some foxtails in it, and I didn't think that any of this hay did, but apparently it must have been one of the bales off of the headlands. Usually those have more weeds in them, and I'm guessing that's where this came from. It appears to me what happened is one of the steers must have got a foxtail in his eye, because all of a sudden his eye is really weepy and it does not look like it feels very good. So we need to get him into the chute, see if we can remove whatever it is that's bothering him, and then depending on what it looks like, I might give him a little shot of medicine too, just to make sure he makes a speedy recovery. problem right there. What are the odds you're gonna let me grab that? It's got a foxtail right there. This is gonna be hard for me to film. I just kind of have to go for it here. Hold still, boy. Hold still. Hold still. I know. I'm sure that doesn't feel good at all. I had it. I'm sorry, buddy. I know that doesn't feel good. I know. There. Got it. Ouchie. Poor guy. It's gonna start feeling better now, buddy. I'm gonna give you a little bit of medicine, okay? You were a very good patient considering what we had to do. Now that we've got the foxtail out of his eye, I'm gonna treat this like pink eye, because in many ways it is like pink eye. Pink eye is caused from an abrasion on the eye that leads to an infection. Well, we know he's got an abrasion on the eye, and with all the discharge and everything, we could assume that there is a minor infection going on there. So we'll give him a shot of the powder here, and in a couple days he ought to be good. Lovely weather we're having today, isn't it? Well, this stuff never comes out when I want it to. And it does come out when I don't want it. I just want to get you one more shot and then it'll feel better. Okay? We got the foxtail removed. We got a little bit of medicine in that eye that should help him heal up and prevent any further issues arising from this. So let's, there's no reason to keep him in the chute anymore. Let's get him back with his friends and let him get back to it. There. Well, you can see how disturbed he is by all this. He doesn't even want to go back out with his friends. He just wants to eat the grass in here. And you know, he was such a good patient, especially when you consider what I had to do to him. I don't think I would hold that still if somebody was reaching in my eye and pulling a foxtail out. So I'm gonna let him have a little snack here, and when he's ready, we'll set him back in with the others. Well, the sun, surprisingly, seems pretty content with staying out, but this wind is not pleasant to be in. So I've got some stuff that I need to do back in the shop, and that's sounding pretty good right now. You guys ready for a run? A little jog, maybe? They're ready. You guys feel better? It's good for you. We're back here in the shop now, and feel that? No wind. Just the way I like it. A while ago, I had mentioned a project that I have been wanting to do, and that is to build some gates to go on the round bale feeders back at the ranch. And the purpose of these would be to replace the corrugated metal that I'm using now to kind of hold the hay in that feeder while the calves are, you know, eating on it for a few days. This is gonna be an extremely basic project. It's really just welding together a rectangle of square tubing and then putting some sort of screen or mesh on it, some sort of a basic hinge. It doesn't have to be anything special because this really won't see a lot of abuse, we think. In fact, this project is so basic that I went back and forth on whether or not to even film it until I decided to add a little twist to it. And that is, I will be TIG welding the entire frame. Now, TIG welding is a process that I have a very little bit of experience with, and it's something that I would like to get a lot better at. And because of that, I thought that this project would be a great opportunity for me to practice. I could sit here at my table and run a bunch of practice beads on scrap metal, and when I get done with that, I just end up with a bunch of random chunks of metal stuck together that I really have no use for. By doing it this way, once I get all my practice done on something that, let's be honest, if the welds aren't pretty or not perfect or even not very strong, it's not gonna matter. But when I get done with all that practice, I will have something that is useful to me that I was gonna build anyway. I have always wanted to be a good TIG welder, or at least a proficient TIG welder, and that's never gonna happen if I don't practice. So this is a good time for me to do it. Let's get after it. The preparation and the fit up's probably gonna take longer than the actual weld will, but I've got all the mill scale ground off of the metal and got everything wiped down with acetone, so I think we can get started. First, I'm gonna try to tack as many of these corners as I can access. Well, you know, it's on there. It's nothing to brag about, though. I definitely have my work cut out for me. But that is the whole point of doing this, because I know with every other process of welding that I have learned, MIG and stick, the only way that I really ever reached a point where I felt comfortable and confident in doing those was just by spending hours and hours doing it. And that's a friend of mine used to say, which this is a very good saying, when it comes to welders, the only difference between a good welder and a bad welder is a couple 100 pounds of rod. Well, dinner is probably hitting the table right about now, so I better call this one here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys, and I hope I'll see you again on Farmer Tyler Ranch.